How much more of this can we take? How many more pubs do we need to see close?
The rising costs of running a hospitality business are slowly becoming completely out of control. You've got VAT at 20%, you've got an increasing energy costs, increasing costs of food and drink, NI on top of increasing minimum wages.
How many more private schools do we need to see go under? How many more hair salons and pharmacies and other businesses do we have to watch go belly up? Or what about farmers selling land or just giving up because they can't make impending inheritance tax payments? All of this putting our food security at risk. And that's before we even mention illegal migration, which they appear to have all but forgotten about right now. In an odd way, Keir Starmer is probably thankful to Donald Trump and his trade intervention for moving our eyes away from his party's woeful mismanagement of absolutely everything. How much more of this can we honestly take? Forget fixing the foundations. This government have decimated them. They continue to tell us they are clearing up the mess left by the previous administration. In my view, they're making more of a mess. But will they listen? After an estimated 13 U-turns, Keir Starmer's government must be thankful for the distraction of international politics. That way they don't have to address problems at home, many of which they've created. So I wanted to make sure that we don't lose sight of the reality the British people are facing every day. Despite Brexit, Keir Starmer chose to align us all closer to the EU instead of focusing on building the UK into a powerhouse that can trade with every nation, setting our own terms, building our own British-based industries, encouraging growth instead of self-sabotage like net zero and exercise in self-harm.
Right. Brace yourselves, because what you are about to see is nothing short of political chaos. Nana Akua walked onto live television and delivered a fierce attack on Keir Starmer's government that has reportedly left Number 10 under serious pressure and Labour advisers scrambling to respond. This was not the usual polished Westminster exchange. This felt raw, direct, and clearly driven by frustration with decisions coming out of Downing Street. Now, before we break down exactly what was said, here is something worth mentioning. 98% of you watching right now have not hit that subscribe button. That is wild when you think about it. You are already here watching British Eyes highlight stories the mainstream media often glosses over. Subscribing costs nothing, takes just 2 seconds, and helps keep this content coming. Right, back to the moment that has Westminster talking.
When Donald Trump asked NATO to send reconnaissance personnel to Greenland, Keir Starmer sent one person. Is that a serious move? Keir Starmer has absolutely no power over Donald Trump. I don't agree with everything that Donald Trump does, and this Greenland demand is likely to backfire. But Keir Starmer has behaved like a schoolboy, giving a teacher an apple.
United Kingdom? Where's United Kingdom? Where's Russia? Where? Somewhere. Is everything going good? Very good. That's good. Nice of you here. These people all came in like 20-minute notice, and I think it's fantastic. And we have so many others, and it's just... And a document, this is... Oh, sorry about that.
Keir Starmer has been weak and ineffective. His coalition of the willing, a combination of a talking shop and a useless crop of leaders coming together to try and make it look like they're doing something, has caused no end of damage to the notion of NATO, where most who are members haven't paid their fair share, relying on the US to pick up the tab. So why would Donald Trump respect NATO if even Keir Starmer and its members are working to undermine it? Keir has allowed members of his own party, like Mayor Sadiq Khan, to openly insult a world leader. I'm amazed that Donald Trump was even able to come to the negotiating table with the UK government after all the shameful abuse hurled by them towards him. Ironically, the Labour Party are pretty thin-skinned. Instead of name-calling...
This is a straightforward discussion. Would you actually use the word fascist about a Nigel Farage-led government or not?
I guess I would just say that if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, in my experience, it usually is a duck.
I mean, what could be more fascist than ID cards, which are wide-ranging pressure, which under wide-ranging pressure, eventually they U-turned. Instead of name-calling, this should be a wake-up call. Instead of selling our sovereignty like Chagos and aligning with the ECHR, a bunch of laws created for a different time, Britain needs to take a lesson from Israel and arm up, become more self-sufficient and re-industrialise, especially our energy. And we need to end being over-reliant on any one country or bloc of nations. Of course, Donald Trump is not going to take Keir Starmer seriously. Nobody does.
Hello.
Keir Starmer has to go.
Picture this. Nana Akua sits down opposite a Labour advisor who probably expected a calm, controlled conversation about government achievements. Maybe highlight a few NHS improvements, mention some infrastructure projects, keep everything safe and comfortably political. What they got instead was a relentless grilling that quickly shifted the tone of the entire discussion. Akua came prepared. Not just broad complaints or party slogans, but detailed examples of where she believes Keir Starmer's government has fallen short for ordinary people. She pointed to small businesses struggling with rising costs, farmers feeling squeezed by new pressures, and public services that many voters feel are still under strain despite election promises of change. And when the Labour advisor attempted to steer the conversation toward progress and long-term strategy, Akua did not allow it to slide. She brought up policy reversals, highlighting moments where the government appeared to shift position after taking a firm stance. The advisor framed those changes as responding to new information and evolving circumstances. Akua framed them as broken promises. Viewers could see the tension building. Then came another sharp line of attack. Akua suggested that the Prime Minister's focus on international appearances and global speeches risks creating the impression that domestic problems are being overshadowed. She contrasted high-profile trips and diplomatic engagements with ongoing concerns about NHS waiting lists and economic pressures at home. Supporters would argue that international leadership strengthens Britain's position. Critics say voters care most about what is happening on their own streets. The exchange struck a nerve online. Clips spread quickly across social media platforms, with people sharing personal experiences about business costs, farming challenges, and pressures inside the NHS. For many watching, Akua's remarks echoed frustrations they already felt. For others, the advisor's defense reflected the complexity of governing during difficult economic times. The timing is also significant. This government is still relatively early in its term, yet public scrutiny is already intense. Every decision is being tested against campaign promises. Labour representatives argue that structural issues take time to fix and that meaningful reform cannot happen overnight. Critics counter that voters expected faster, clearer change. What made the moment stand out was not just the criticism itself, but the tone. Akua challenged not only specific policies but the broader narrative coming from Number 10. It was a clash between official messaging and lived experience, between statistics and perception. Now the real question is how this shapes the wider political conversation. Was this simply another tough interview in a highly charged political climate, or does it signal deeper public frustration? One thing is certain: scrutiny is intensifying, and both government and opposition figures know that voters are watching closely. If expectations continue to clash with reality, the next general election will be fiercely contested.
Well, I'm joined now by a former Labour Special Advisor, Paul Richards. Paul, welcome to the programme. So there you have it, Keir Starmer. Of course, he needs to look at international affairs, but do you get where I'm coming from here? That this must be almost, although it's not a great distraction in terms of distracting from very local and internal politics, we're now looking internationally. And Keir Starmer doesn't really, I think, want to look at national politics in this country.
No, I don't agree with that, Nana. And I would say that, of course, the international stage is the important place for Britain to be on. And we should be looking at rearmament of Europe. You know, we need to be looking at the Russian threat. We need to look at our alliances and be staunchly pro-NATO. But the Labour Party is also doing the things that people care about domestically too. You know, we've had good numbers this week on the NHS, waiting lists falling and faster times of the NHS. Potholes are getting fixed finally. There's great announcement 2 days ago on Northern Rail links so people can get to work quicker. So I think under the surface of the big global events, there are local improvements going on, and they have to be taken in the round. Not everything's perfect, but some things are moving in the right direction.
Yeah, but what about all the U-turns? Like, everything. I mean, look, if you're effective and efficient in government, then you'll come up with properly researched policies that are likely to be successful, instead of chucking things out there, making everything uncertain, and then having to renege when even your own backbenchers are telling you, no, we're not going to go with that.
Well, a couple of them you mentioned there, surely you would welcome. So, not going ahead with the compulsory ID cards, and then
but why
also
start it?
And then put up the limit for the farmers' inheritance tax, which is something they demanded. So these are things that should be welcomed, because I think, under the scrutiny and also campaigning as well, the policies have deemed to be not popular and not successful. So they've been rowed back on. But I mean, that is what grown-up government is all about. It's about listening and doing the thing that should work, rather than just ploughing on ideologically for the sake of it. That's what we had with the Liz Truss.
Like they are with private schools. Yeah, but you see, the thing is...
That's just treating private schools as the business they are. They're businesses, and they should be treated like... They're not charities, they are businesses, and they'd be treated like businesses. And lots of them closed before Labour was even in government. They do open, they do close,
Yeah, over 100 though. Look, but the problem with these U-turns, as you say, is why to change tack when you've gone the wrong way. First of all, they've gone the wrong way repeatedly. But then, let's be honest, in some cases, someone may take their life, like a farmer who, as we know, took his life, and we now know that it was because he was scared and worried about the inheritance tax proposition, which now has kind of reversed, but not fully. It needs to fully reverse, really, because even the level it's at is still a bit ridiculous. But when in making these policies, there are consequences to U-turning. And that is, it's all very well to say, oh yeah, but we eventually changed our minds. But businesses have gone under because of the expectation of something that was meant to come down the line, and then it didn't, but it's too late.
Well, I'm always careful. I always take on board the Samaritans' guidelines on discussing people who have taken their life by suicide, because you don't put motives on it without really knowing the details. And I think that's quite dangerous territory. I think most people in the industry, welcomed the fact that the rules are changing. And I think that's reasonable, particularly in the farming community. The £5 million cap is, it's a lot of money. And they're not even then paying the same rate of inheritance that you and I do. So they do get a special deal. But it is a government that's listening. But like I say, below the surface of all these rows, there is just a government competently getting on with stuff, and things like the improvements in the health service is a good example. I mean, the national minimum wage is going up. The triple...
Right. Brace yourselves, because what you are about to see is nothing short of political chaos. Nana Akua walked onto live television and delivered a fierce attack on Keir Starmer's government that has reportedly left Number 10 under serious pressure and Labour advisers scrambling to respond. This was not the usual polished Westminster exchange. This felt raw, direct, and clearly driven by frustration with decisions coming out of Downing Street. Now, before we break down exactly what was said, here is something worth mentioning. 98% of you watching right now have not hit that subscribe button. That is wild when you think about it. You are already here watching British Eyes highlight stories the mainstream media often glosses over. Subscribing costs nothing, takes just 2 seconds, and helps keep this content coming. Right, back to the moment that has Westminster talking.
For the pensions means pensions are going up. So there are, signs of hope there. And the growth figures were better than everyone thought this last few weeks as well. So that's another example of something just perhaps below the radar that, we will get better growth in the economy. And I think, when you look at the turmoil in the Conservatives and, Generic and all the stuff this week, Labour is just sort of behind the scenes, just getting on with governing. And I long for a day, Nana, where we wake up and there's just no politics in the news. You know what I mean? Just people, the government just getting on with making our lives slightly better each day. And we can all talk about Manchester United or something like that.
Yeah, but you see, unfortunately, that's not going to happen because there's too much turmoil, and also within the Labour Party itself. So we've had backbenchers saying that they're sick and tired of coming up and representing a policy and, going all for it, and then suddenly they realise it's U-turning, and they then have to somehow turn around and say, oh, well, we've got to toe the party line now because we're not doing it. We said it was a good idea, but obviously it isn't.
Well, I mean, That's a fair point. And certainly I've been on your show defending all kinds of things and across GB News defending things which then it turns out we're not going to be doing after all. I mean, Wes Streeting's point this week about getting it right first time, I think is well made. And that might be my message to ministers too. But, it is a government listening. It is a government that's saying, well, if it's not going to work, if it's not going to fix the problem that we're trying to fix, then we'll do something else. It's not about just pursuing a course for the sake of it to look tough. It's about what actually works, and that was always our mantra in government last time round. What matters is what works, and I think some of these things, we tried it didn't work. Let's try something better and different.
Yeah, and on the mention of Wes Streeting, a lot of people are saying that Wes Streeting should take over from Keir Starmer, or that he should be sacked for daring to pose some sort of opposition towards Keir Starmer. Where do you stand with that?
Well, I saw his speech last week in person, and it was a very good political speech. But there's no great threat or challenge. It was just him as a very grown-up senior member of the cabinet putting forward his vision and his idea of politics. And then anonymous people, by the way, briefing the Times, 3 of them apparently, that he should be sacked. Well, I would say that's a little bit of jealousy, to be honest. And I mean, Tony Blair always used to say there's nothing ignoble about wanting to be Prime Minister. If you're a senior politician, nothing wrong with that. And Wes is somebody who perhaps might be in that mould down the line, but there's no vacancy now. And also, it's very hard to get rid of a sitting Labour Prime Minister, unlike the Conservatives who chopped and changed. We've got our constitution, it's quite sort of stable. So it means that it's very difficult to do. And also, there are lots of other people in the same boat, similarly, equally valid. So there isn't an obvious person in the wings like there was with Gordon Brown waiting for Tony Blair to go. So I think the scenario is very, very different, which means it's probably more likely that Starmer stays put than less likely.
Well, I suspect if he stays put, then the Labour Party may well be toast, because a lot of people don't seem to like him. He's incredibly unpopular.
He is right now because he's taking big, tough, difficult decisions. But I think if people feel that there's a bit more money in their pocket, they can see their neighbourhood police out on the street, they get a faster appointment for their hospital, things aren't quite so bad. Are they going to throw all that up in the air and say, oh, let's risk it on something untried and untested? Or will they stick with nurse for fear of something worse? And I think it's entirely possible Labour could win the election next time round, just persuading people who voted Labour last time to vote for their local MP this time. That's all it takes. We don't need to switch people. We just need to keep the coalition together that got us in last time. Just on balance, saying, well, in 50-50 in that ballot box, give them another go. It's entirely possible, as indeed is the entirely opposite view where they throw us out, with a massive swing. I mean, it's absolutely the most fluid time in politics I've ever experienced, and it can go either way. But, that first option of a Labour victory is still on the cards.
All right, well, I beg to differ with that one, but thank you, Paul Richards. Always a pleasure to get your thoughts.